As the Ukraine conflict enters its third year, the shifting U.S. stance marks a pivotal moment in the world's trajectory. Under President Donald Trump, the approach had shifted from unwavering support for Ukraine to exploring negotiations with Russia, including controversial proposals for early elections in Ukraine. This shift is further emphasized by Trump's criticism of President Zelensky and the contentious linking of military aid to access Ukraine's rare earth minerals, a proposal Kyiv rejected due to insufficient security guarantees. U.S. National Security Advisor Mike Waltz even suggested Zelensky stop criticizing Trump and sign a $500 billion mineral deal as these developments unfold. Critical questions arise. What does the evolving dynamic mean for Ukraine and the prospects of lasting peace in Europe? Welcome to Think Tank. U.S. President Donald Trump has announced a second round of ceasefire talks with Russian delegates set for February the 25th in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. Kiev, the independent state, stated that the initial discussions held earlier this week excluded Ukraine officials, sparking criticism from Kiev and European allies. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio outlined agreed objectives, including restoring embassy staff, forming a Ukraine peace team, and exploring economic ties. Russia's Deputy Foreign Minister Sergei Ryabkov hinted at a possible Trump-Putin summit, emphasizing the need to normalize relations and address global issues, including Ukraine. However, Ryabkov stressed that planning remains in early stages. President Zelensky firmly rejected the talks' legitimacy, citing Ukraine's exclusion, while European nations expressed concerns over being sidelined. United Kingdom Prime Minister Keir Starmer faces a crucial meeting with U.S. President Donald Trump at the White House on Thursday. According to The Guardian, Starmer advised to stay concise and subtly flattering. Starmer aims to navigate Trump's unpredictable nature while emphasizing concerns over a rushed Ukraine peace deal favoring Putin. Starmer is cautioned to avoid speaking for European leaders, as Trump has openly criticized them and instead emphasized the UK's provocative role in supporting Ukraine. With UK public opinion critical of Trump's Ukraine stance, the meeting is an opportunity for Starmer to assert his leadership while carefully managing Trump's unpredictable responses.
The evolving U.S. stance on Ukraine, particularly under President Donald Trump, raises questions about the potential for ending the ongoing war through early elections and negotiations involving rare earth minerals. Recently, the United States proposed a resolution at the United Nations urging a swift end to the conflict, without mentioning Kiev's territorial integrity, aligning with Trump's vision of a peaceful resolution without direct attribution of blame to Russia. This has sparked concern among Ukrainian officials and their European allies. This shift marks a departure from previous U.S. support for Ukraine. As discussions between U.S. and Russian officials progress, concerns are mounting that Ukraine may be pressured into unfavorable terms. Trump's administration has suggested that concessions, including territorial compromises and the relinquishment of rare earth mineral rights, might be necessary for peace. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has firmly rejected any proposals that would require Ukraine to give away its resources without security guarantees, emphasizing the impracticality of conducting elections during wartime. The implications of these developments are significant. If the US continues to prioritize negotiations with Russia over Ukraine's interests, if early elections and concessions on rare earth minerals become focal points in negotiations, it could alter the trajectory of the conflict and redefine alliances in Eastern Europe. The geopolitical landscape remains fraught, with allies expressing skepticism about US intentions, and the exclusion of Ukraine from critical negotiations raises fears of a detrimental peace agreement.
And for more analysis, we're joined from Washington by Justin Thomas Russell, an Executive Director of the Global Foreign Policy Center of Washington. Welcome, sir, to the program, and it's a pleasure to have you with us. Mr. Russell, how does the recent U.S. proposal at the United Nations for a swift end to the conflict reflect a shift in U.S. policy towards Ukraine under Trump administration, of course?
Well, thank you for having me as always. The dramatic shift is that if you look at the UN resolution, and the UN resolution basically does not put blame on the Ukraine-Russian war on Russia. It basically absolves Moscow of all responsibility for the provocation of this unjust invasion into Ukraine.
Sir, so you do see it as unjust?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. My opinion has always been and continues to be that contrary to the Trump administration's mantra, I've always believed this was an unjust, unprovoked, and an illegal, according to UN Charter, invasion of a sovereign nation and a sovereign member of the United Nations. Everybody in the region, most likely every major power in the world, understands that this was an illegal invasion invoked by Moscow against a sovereign partner. That being the case, what we're seeing now is a dramatic shift from what was a defending of a sovereign territory in Ukraine, in backing an ally in the region in Vladimir Zelensky, and then preventing further Russian aggression into the area. What we see now with Steve Wyckoff's recent statements as early as this morning is there's no question whether or not Washington and the United States government would back Article 5 of the NATO Charter, which clearly states that an attack on one is an attack on all, and we will defend that. That has particular issue with our NATO ally partners in Poland, but this also causes some concern with our NATO allies in Western Europe as well.
What kind of concerns, sir, does this concern NATO fellows, sir, or NATO countries?
Well, the concern is twofold. Number one, it all focuses on the intentions of Moscow and Vladimir Putin. If Vladimir Putin is going to do this to Ukraine, and we've seen him do this in the past. We've seen him do this in Georgia. We've seen him do it in other former Soviet states. If he'll do this in Ukraine, so close to the border of NATO partners, where will he stop unchecked? If we do validate his actions, if we do not continue to put pressure on Moscow in order to hold them accountable for their actions, basically this validates Vladimir Putin's actions and his aggressions in the region. And if the U.S. isn't going to keep him in check, if the U.S. is going to validate it, where does that stop? Does he go into Poland? Does he go into the Baltic states? Could he go as far as even potentially up to the German borders? There's a lot of concern regarding the recent Trump administration statements on this. It basically it basically validates Vladimir Putin and doesn't hold him accountable.
Okay, we're joined now by Ivan Uas, an advisor at Ukraine National Center from Kyiv. A very warm welcome to the program, sir. What are the implications of calls for early presidential and parliamentary elections in Ukraine before the end of 2025, especially if a ceasefire with Russia is possible to be achieved?
My greetings to the studio guests and all audience. First of all, sorry for my delay.
No problem, sir. A very warm welcome.
Thank you very much. So, about elections, we should understand that according to Ukrainian constitution, we could not have election in time of martial law. As for president election...
So early elections now are not possible, sir.
You know that for elections, we should need changes in constitutions that in time of martial law is impossible. As for president election, we can make changes in the law about election of the president, but as a person who write the legislation about election 15 years ago, I can say that election is not one day, it's 90 days process. Guarantee security of our people during 90 days period, it's not so easy. It means that first of all, it's not be shooting, but every night Russia attack Ukraine. So, and every day near to the front line, we have those attacks. So it's very hard to organize this procedure. Of course, theoretically, we can change our constitution and in parliament say that we elected new president and so on. But I'm not sure that this result will be interesting to our partners who say that, guys, it's cheating, and I can agree that it will be cheating, but at least we can make those elections. That's why we explain to our partners that in time of active military action, it's impossible. United States of America like to say that, that they have experience of election during the war. In 1944, they have president election, but there was no military action in the U.S. territory, let's be frank. Now in Ukraine, half of our territory under constant attack. Furthermore, 20% of our territory occupied. So how can we make election and have a war at one moment? How can soldiers vote? For me, it's a question. That's why Ukraine explained to partners that it's impossible or it's very hard, and even when we hear a statement, yet you should do that, we explain to them how you can imagine that soldiers shooting and in the same moment they are voting. I think that it's ridiculous. So that's our position, but of course we see that partners press on us, but we try to explain to them why we have such position, and it's not something like approach of President Zelensky to preserve his power. He said that immediately after the end of military actions and after end of martial law,
Mr. Russell, your narrative on Mr. Ivan's, of course, comment, and do you see it also ridiculous, or you're fine with what's happening?
Well, I mean, to my colleague in Kyiv, what he's saying is correct. For the U.S. to sit there and, number one, have negotiations on the future of Ukraine and the sovereignty of Ukraine without Ukrainian officials being at the table is ludicrous. And this is something that we've seen before with the Trump administration. We saw it before with the negotiations with the Taliban prior to the fall of Afghanistan.
So, sir, you see it as ridiculous.
I'm sorry?
You see it as ridiculous.
I see it as absolutely ridiculous. You cannot have a negotiation trying to come up with a peaceful settlement of military aggression without both sides at the table trying to negotiate their interests. This is no question ludicrous. It is also ludicrous for the U.S. to sit there and dictate to a trusted partner, as we have in Ukraine, and tell them what we think.
Which trusted partner are you referring to, sir?
I'm sorry?
Which trusted partner are you referring to at this point?
Ukraine has been a trusted partner in the region for the U.S. for years. the idea that Washington has the ability to go and tell them what's best for them without, one, having them at the table, and two, trying to tell them what is in their best interest, even though it does not it does not comply with their
Do you
national
read this, sir, as
constitution.
very humiliating?
I'm sorry?
Do you read it as very humiliating?
I don't want to classify it as humiliating or not, but what I'm saying is this is not appropriate for the way that we would trust a partner. We are treating Russia right now. The U.S. policy right now is treating Russia as more of a partner than Ukraine. And to me, that poses a lot of issues to our Western partners who have worked very closely with Ukraine. And it also calls into question the ability for the U.S. to be trusted not only by partners that we have in this region, non-NATO partners, but this is also calling into question the possibility that will the U.S. stand up as part of its agreement with NATO? There are so many factors about the policy that the Trump administration is pushing forward and is being pushed by Steve Witkoff, the special envoy. There's a lot of things that are going to make not only our NATO partners, but our own partners very, very concerned.
Mr. Ivanyo asked, how has President Zelensky's rejection of proposals that lack security guarantees influenced the ongoing discussions between the United States and Russia, sir?
Of course, we understand that the United States of America that needs some deal from Ukraine, not guaranteed to us security. And when we are talking about our some assets, first of all, minerals, we think that if we give some part of them to US, and you know that according to estimation, Ukraine has reserves of minerals at $26 trillion. Actually, it's an approximate assessment. So, of course, we need guarantee not on words. We have guarantee in Budapest Memorandum, where the United States of America, France, the United Kingdom, actually then China joined to them, said that if Ukraine give its nuclear weapon to Russia, and Russia, of course, was guarantor of this deal, no one happened with Ukraine. When Russia attacked Ukraine, and we remind about this deal, we don't receive the actually more serious engagement. Of course, we thank to you, the United States of America, to the United Kingdom, to France for military support. But on the other hand, sometimes in Ukraine, as a guarantee of security, we expected the direct engagement of soldiers of their countries. We understand that it's very hard politically, that it's not the time when a foreign country can support the other country by their troops on the ground.
It's not about another country supporting another country. It was about the United States supporting Ukraine from the beginning of, from the past 3 years, sir.
Yes, we of course, as
so there's changing in dynamics that's taking place now.
Yes, now it's a question how it will be, but you know, now it's discussion, because this deal about soil minerals, actually it's something like attempt to explain to the United States of America that support of Ukraine will be in their interest. Furthermore, it's not only support of the world based on the rule of law. It's very important because theoretically you can have a deal with Russia, who controlled 20% of Ukrainian territory, and receive these minerals from them. But in that case, the rule of law will be destroyed. And we all want to have the world where rules will actually exist, where will be no rules at all. It's very dangerous for the dynamic of our world. That's why when we are talking about guarantees, of course, number one is NATO. The United States of America say no. But on the other hand, when we make proposition of victory plan of President Zelensky, we said that Ukrainian soldiers can substitute American soldiers in Europe. Donald Trump said that he wants to substitute U.S. soldiers in Europe. He don't want to see his soldiers in Europe. And we say, okay, it could be Ukrainians, but two questions. First, we need to win a war. Second question, we need to be in NATO. And after that, of course, we can help to Donald Trump idea be realized, so substitution of U.S. soldiers in Europe. quite possible it could be.
Okay, I'll go
So
back to
now-
Mr. Russell. Sir, what role do rare earth minerals play in current negotiations between the United States and Ukraine? And why are they significant and how it can move the needle on U.S. mineral security? And sir, were they of significance in the past 3 years?
Well, those are two very specific questions. The first one regarding the minerals deal. The minerals deal is basically in what I would call a mafia move. It's basically where a mob boss would come in and we've given you these arms, we've given you this support, and now you got to pay us back and pay us back, twofold. I'm not a big fan of the minerals deal that was proposed to, and I don't think it's even remotely fair to a nation that we would consider a partner and a friend. What that does do is put pressure. We're trying to put basically racketeering pressure on a world leader in Vladimir Zelensky, and that's not going to fly, and it's not flying with our NATO partners as well. Regarding the changeover from the past 3 years is when we talk about mineral security, there is a lot of raw minerals that are there inside the boundaries of Ukraine. These are materials that go into stuff like computer chips. They go into server boxes. There's a lot of materials there that are very, very important to the technological growth and the secure growth of the world. The U.S. wants custody of that, and they're putting pressure on Zelensky to do that. There's no question also that Russia would love to have access to that. That gives them play in the global community, in the global economic community, something that they have not had a top tier at the table with in many years. So there's a lot of factors in why the minerals are important. And then we're also seeing why.
And were they
Donald
important
Trump,
in the past 3 years, sir? Again, I'm asking you.
What's that?
Were they important in the three past years during the war?
Sure, they've always been important. But what we haven't seen is the U.S. trying to get this loan sharking program out of Ukraine. If the U.S. continues, here's my approach and your direct opinion. If the U.S. was smart about this, we would go in there, back Ukraine, support Ukraine against Russian aggression. By doing that, that opens up a good faith dialogue between Kyiv and Washington. Once we can find, and there should be and will be, I believe, a peaceful end to this, this conflict in the region. Once there is a peaceful solution to this conflict, and we can come up with a deal in the region, if we have a lot of good faith in built up in Kyiv, that makes Kyiv more likely to work with our economy in helping to try and bring those raw metals and those raw materials to market with U.S. companies and U.S. support. Why give away that good faith if it's so important now by using a hammer against our partner in Kyiv, when if we can use
because
the good
Trump
faith
wants
built
it
up
like
on-
this, sir. What do you think? Okay, I'll ask Mr. Yuas, what are the key areas of divergence and alignment between the United States and European approaches to resolving the conflict in Ukraine, and how do these differences impact the overall effectiveness of Western policy, sir?
Of course, we see division between U.S. and European Union. Donald Trump actually promised to increase, first of all, taxes on European products, so customs fee for European products. So it could be customs war, not only with neighboring Canada and Mexico, but with European Union too, and China, of course. And of course, there is a problem that our main allies have quarrels between themselves. I mean, US, European Union, probably Turkey should be added there. And of course, it's a question that United States of America, while starting talks with Russia, not inviting European Union. European Union, several countries of European Union have a fear that they could be sacrificed because Russia sometimes really make a signal that they want to, first of all, NATO return to 2007 borders, because sometimes they dreamed 1997, borders even. So that was 30 years ago. But Russia really want to return Soviet Union back. Soviet Union back means 3 European Union countries: Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia. And of course, it's threat to EU. And any talks with Russia that quite possible will discuss the territory of European Union, namely those 3 countries.
Mr.
Of course,
Ivan US, I'm very, very sorry I have to wrap up this episode. I wanted to discuss more with Mr. Wasil and with you, but unfortunately in other episodes, because I don't have enough time. And of course, as these developments unfold, critical questions arise. What does this evolving dynamic mean for Ukraine and the prospects of lasting peace in Europe? That was Justin Thomas Russell, an executive director of the Global Foreign Policy Center of Washington. And we are also joined by Ivan Uas. Thank you very much for being with us, and thank you very much for a very informative and valuable program that brings us to the end of today's episode of Think Tank. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned for more coming up here on Qnews.